Everybody, while you're joining in, appreciate your attendance. I'm going to launch a poll since we do this webinar series without having people register. We really don't know who our audience is. So I want to launch a poll. You guys just fill out what role are you playing within your organization. We've got 4 selections there. I think everybody should be able to fit into one of those. I'll leave this poll up while we let some other people join in, and then we'll get started. Right. Guys, you think we've given enough time?
Let's give a few more minutes, John.
All right.
Let some of those late stragglers get in.
We need some Jeopardy music or something. For those just joined us and didn't hear what I was talking about with the poll, you should see a poll on your screen. We just want to know who's watching us today. We ask you to listen to us talk and educate you all on unregistered. So let us know what role you're playing in your company.
Also, John, take a look at the chat when you get a chance. Everybody, we're going to kind of turn chat off. We'd rather you, when you're communicating with us, you use the question and answer feature within Zoom, just so that we can organize it a little better and that sort of thing. So,
very good point, sir. All right, we're at 2 minutes after.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And now I can share the results. Fairly even audience here. That's kind of what we were planning for. So guys, I think we prepared well for our audience here. Looks
excellent.
Like the slight majority goes to the C-level and executives. Everybody, thank you all for joining us. Again, this if you've watched our previous, this is our 3rd one. We wanted to find creative ways to continue to help people. Those of you that are familiar with ABS, that is at the core of what we do. And we just wanted to put together sessions that educate our customers and people who may be new to ABS. So by way of introduction, my name is John Clark. I'm the VP of Business Development at ABS. Today we've got a couple of guest panelists, Tucker Oldham, also with ABS, who's our Director of Technical Account Management. He and his team are responsible for guiding our customers through an IT roadmap that aligns with their business goals. He talks to our customers a lot about security, so he's going to be able to bring a perspective that we're seeing on a local level. Also with us today is Brad Hanley. Brad is with a partner of ours called Arctic Wolf. We rely on Arctic Wolf to help us monitor in real time some of our customers that are looking for a more advanced level of security where we can identify and isolate things in a near real-time manner. Couple of things that I want to address before we get started. We are going to go about 30 minutes in a discussion and education session. We are reserving a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, but please use the Q&A section there at the bottom. I'm going to try to squeeze those questions into Brad and Tucker as we're going along. May reserve them for Q&A at the end, but just ask the questions as they come up, put them out there, and I'll sneak them in as I can. After today's webinar, we're going to put together a couple of more security sessions geared towards healthcare and legal verticals. So if you guys are in that healthcare legal vertical, I'm going to share our, there we go. Tucker, can you see that?
I cannot, John, but that's
Okay. Hopefully, those of you in attendance can see my screen. I put some contact information out there. Existing customers, you probably know how to reach us. Tucker's information is up there. If you're new to ABS, reach out to me. We're going to push out these vertical security sessions through email and LinkedIn, just as you got to us today. But if you want to make sure you're invited to those, please reach out to us. You can also reach out to us if you want the recording for people in your organization that couldn't make it. So I'm going to pull that back down for now.
Just to reiterate to everybody, Brad and I and John don't necessarily want to hear ourselves talk. Really do us a favor and make this as interactive as possible, and write your questions in that Q&A section in Zoom. We've done this successfully before, and it's really helpful to us when we know that we're addressing your all's concerns, not just talking. So help us out there, please.
Yeah, and no question's a bad question.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it, odds are a majority of the other people on the call are also thinking about it.
Yeah, good call.
All right. So let's kind of get towards what we came here for today. We are talking about security. Security is important, and everybody in an organization has a responsibility to help maintain that security. IT and executive leadership, they're working on policies and tools to put in place to help protect their data and their end users. End users are being cautious on emails that they're clicking on and websites that they're opening. And vendors like ABS, we take steps to make sure that we're securing our customers' information that we have and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to secure the entire thing. Work from home has put a new spin on things that we need to be concerned about. Hackers are definitely taking advantage of the new vulnerabilities, people quickly going home, not having VPN infrastructure, utilizing home workstations. We are seeing an increase in malicious traffic, a substantial increase during this work from home time. So we wanted to come together, give you guys some examples, some practical tips. One thing that we all can agree on, the three panelists here, security solutions are not one size fits all. Whether ABS is helping you through the executive business review process, or we've gone through a cybersecurity assessment with you, we're recommending specific solutions that fit your business. So we are going to kind of try to generalize these to hit the broader audience, and is one of the reasons why we decided let's do a legal and healthcare vertical after this.
I think one thing to also point out there, John, is one size not only doesn't fit all for each business, we also understand the crazy time that we're in. So there are a lot of things that we can do depending on where you all are at from a budget standpoint, all of that kind of thing, but still be helping to secure the environment. So that's a big piece of what we want to talk about today. Excellent.
So Brad and Tucker are going to do most of the heavy lifting from here. I'm going to kind of watch the questions. Looks like we've already got a couple of coming in. Brad, do you want to get us started, buddy?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks, John and Tucker and the entire Advanced Business Solutions team for having me in and for the great partnership that we've developed. So yeah, like we were kind of talking about, it's really interesting the change that the industry and the world has really gone through in the last month and a half roughly, where now all of a sudden people are running to hibernate really in their homes to protect themselves and to protect others. And that's really changed how businesses operate and how security teams are securing that infrastructure now that it's no longer behind the corporate umbrella, right? No longer inside of those home offices. So yeah, there's a lot of things that have changed. I also find it to be quite interesting that even as things change and evolve, and I've been in information security for like 10 or so years, so I'm not new to this game. But as things do change and evolve, it's always interesting because the basics really get to be more important in situations like this. So that's one thing that I think is very important to emphasize is the basics of security, being aware of what you're clicking on and doing your due diligence and things like that. And kind of on that note, we've seen a big change in how criminals are reacting in this situation because criminals are smart, they're organized. They're now not just like the 12-year-old sitting in their parents' basement playing around on the computer. It's now like full businesses that are actually attacking other businesses to steal data, and sometimes
big organizations.
Exactly. Sometimes state sanctioned, right?
Yeah.
There's countries like Russia who say it's not illegal to hack unless you're hacking a fellow Russian, which adds a lot of gray territory there, which is not good. So some of the trends I thought would be kind of fun to talk about that we're seeing in security, specifically in cybersecurity, is this COVID-19 branding that has started to transpire. Meaning that a lot of the attacks are starting to utilize the headlines of COVID-19 to incentivize, a level of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And when those are at play, people are more susceptible to doing things that they typically wouldn't do. So some good examples of this. So like we saw an attack a couple weeks ago with an email that came into a customer. And the customer saw the email. They didn't see anything suspicious on it. Essentially, it looked like it was coming from their HR team, sending out an email asking to fill out a poll to just gauge how everybody's feeling. But they needed to make sure everyone was healthy and happy and working hard. And there was some threats in there as well of this needs to be done by this date. This is a mandatory thing. So there was definitely a drive to go in and actually click on stuff. So when you go to fill out this poll, you would click on the hyperlink in the email. It would bring you to a website, and the website would look like a login page for Outlook, the web app. And you enter in your credentials, and that was where the problem really got worse, because you now no longer had your credentials under your name. It was some criminal, somewhere else now had possession of your login information.
So that Outlook website wasn't really Outlook. It wasn't really Microsoft. It was a hacker who created one that looked as that.
Exactly. It looked at as that. So if you kind of look back at the anatomy of what went wrong, or like how the criminal was able to do this, and you look at the email address that the email came from, it came from the proper nomenclature around the first last name. But if you look at the domain was changed slightly. So as an example, to hide obviously people's identities, think of the domain hello.com, HELLO.com. So if you change up very small things, maybe you drop one of those L's, or maybe you replace an L with a number 1, and to the human eye, it's kind of hard to catch that. If you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. And that's exactly what happened. The domain name was changed slightly. The end user, I think people are more likely when they're at home to be less skeptical because they're comfortable, right? You're in your home, you're supposed to be comfortable. Unfortunately, they clicked on the links. Thankfully, we were able to identify that it was occurring, and we alerted them right away. But a good way to avoid this is obviously be very diligent about what you're clicking on, be skeptical about it, but also have the advanced business solutions teams put in rules that say, hey, when I receive an email from a domain that's foreign to my internal domain, it should say in big letters, external. So that way, it's coming from an external source.
Yeah, we can, or what I've commonly seen is an external added to the subject line, or a banner at the top of
the banner.
email.
Yep. We deploy that
giving
all the
your
time.
users visual cues that this is not coming from inside. Be careful.
Yeah, both are fantastic. There's another attack that I thought was really clever, and it really shows the weaknesses of working in a home environment as compared to the strengths of working in a corporate environment. So oftentimes in home networks, you'll see you'll have your internet service provider will supply a router and modem, which are typically one device now, and the router has default credentials. So you'll have the username of admin and the password of admin. And criminals know this. And what they do is they actually have tools that automatically just scan around the internet. They're not targeted attacks. They're just looking for devices that have those administrative credentials on there. And then once that tool identifies them, essentially what it does is it preloads them into a CSV file or an Excel file. And it basically allows them to know exactly where they can go to start perpetrating some more targeted attacks because of that weak posture. So in this case, what had occurred is a criminal identified one of the companies that they had the admin for username and password. So they logged in and they changed up what's called a DNS server, a domain name server. And think of a domain name server. It's a very important security thing. And I'll tell you why here, because it's how it works. So let's say you go to www.google.com. So you're basically asking another computer, which is the domain name server, what IP address does this domain belong to? So when you go, your computer's asking a remote computer where to go to. And criminals can actually utilize that information by changing the DNS server to being a malicious one. So then they can redirect your traffic anywhere they want. So in this particular case, what had occurred is the user at their home office went to a website and it brought them over to the World Health Organization's website, which it looked like that. But right when you got to the page, it would pull up in a big little pop-up within the browser would say, click here to download the latest map for COVID-19, as well as to receive push alerts for COVID-19. Sounds fabulous, right? I get it. Like, I get why you would click on that. So the user clicked on it, and what they actually ended up downloading was a really nasty piece of malware, or ransomware is what it was. So now they had a ransomware infection on their machine, which is not a good thing for anybody. And all of their data was encrypted, and essentially anything that they had on their computer was lost. So kind of retracing the steps to how you would actually solve around that. Obviously, the first thing, always be diligent. If you go to a site and it redirects you to another site that you weren't expecting, especially if it's asking for a download of something, that should flag is definitely something that you should be worried about. That's when I would call the Advanced Business Solutions team immediately. Past that, go into your home routers and change the default password. Put it to something complex that you like to use. It doesn't have to be crazy, but change it from that standard admin password or whatever that default credential might be.
To Brad's point, I found an article out there this week talking about not just the generic passwords on home routers, but that hackers are now starting to look at ways, vulnerabilities within those home routers. So we have to make sure that we're helping you secure those home networks as well, or thinking about some of those ways. And that changing of the password is a great tip there for those home users. John, I know we got some questions coming through.
Yes, let me throw a couple out there.
Julie, I wanted to answer Priscilla's right off the top, if you don't mind.
Go for it, sir.
So she had asked, I'm surprised you're using Zoom, given the security concerns. I think that's a great point. I will tell you, we do not use Zoom as our main conferencing platform. We are usually using, when we're talking to our customers, when we are talking internally, we are using Microsoft Teams. Zoom is a great platform for webinars and general information, and frankly, the more folks that Zoom bomb us and come into this meeting, the happier I'm going to be. So your question is a great one, though, in the sense that we need to be thinking about where we're giving confidential information, what tools we ought to be using for certain things. So that's a holistic discussion, not just about Zoom itself. And I do think that Zoom is working on those very much, but
we really
reason.
considered the platform when we did this, and Zoom bombing and those security things was a concern, but what we were doing here in the info anybody could get was very minimal. So we recognized and managed our risk here.
Yeah. I've actually
Brad, go
had
ahead.
many of conversations around this, and again, I've been in information security for a while, so I've seen how this kind of plays out. And this is Zoom's facing something that, and I've never been affiliated with them. That's important to know. Zoom's facing something that no other company has really faced before, where they went from a pretty well used platform to being the world's most used platform for video communication overnight. Literally just overnight, just one day, their user count skyrocketed like 100-fold, which is pretty wild. And they've done a lot of the right things. Right when vulnerabilities were identified, they've been really quick at rolling out patches or fixes to those. And if you really look at the different issues that Zoom had, it was really focused on the end users misconfiguring their systems. Zoom actually had a pretty decent security stance, and they've done lots of other really good stuff. Like they hired on the former CISO from Facebook, which is really fabulous. He's coming on from an advisory role. They've also launched a CISO panel to help advise them on how to mitigate some of these risks. So I actually would give them a lot of credit for what they've done. And I personally still use Zoom, but I think what John and Tucker were saying were spot on. You really have to be diligent about knowing the platform or how you're communicating and what data or what information you are communicating over that platform. Because when you're utilizing the internet, there's a layer of it where you just have to assume that it could potentially be public. So you have to really be diligent about how you operate.
So Brad, I think this Zoom vulnerability is a great example of hackers knew what people were going to be using and went to that product, found where the vulnerabilities were, and took advantage. They're looking at your home computers that you're using, your lack of VPN, how are you accessing your business data, so that their tricks aren't new. They're just using different flavors and leveraging this COVID crisis as a way to tug at your heartstrings, if you will. It's social engineering. So great example. I want to grab a couple of more questions here. There's actually two about the external creating that visibility for your users. If you add the banner of external, does it disrupt searching emails to find a message you need to refer back to?
Yeah, I saw those questions, John, and this is a really, really very little impact to your end users other than the banner itself. There is no functionality loss or anything along those lines. It is simply in my case, in Outlook, a yellow warning that this is an external user that I received the email from. So very little, if any, impact to your end user.
And to answer another question, explain more how external emails are identified. Mark, I'm assuming you're asking, how do our systems identify that it's external? The way email works and the way it flows, there's tags, and systems are smart enough to recognize if it is actually John Clark at advancedbusinesssolutions.com, or if someone used an external email server to pretend like they were me. So our systems are smart enough to recognize that and put that tag on there, which would prevent some spoofing and potential financial loss. Another question coming in about the admin password. It's actually a great question. If the admin username is actually something other than admin or administrator, in other words, the default that the manufacturer puts in, are these also susceptible to hacking? Actually, from my tech days, I remember Microsoft doing this around Server 2008. They want to get rid of that default administrator password or username because everyone knows about it. Create a new admin account that is not named admin or administrator. We like to use AVS_admin to help manage our users. That's a great way to mitigate any kind of risks of brute force attacks into your network or giving the keys to the castle because you have admin and password one as your credentials.
Yeah, and if you can keep that admin credential, the username portion itself, to be a non-identifying feature, that's even a better thing, right? So that way you essentially have almost the strength of two passwords in one, right? Two randomized things into one.
We also are starting to move on the service side, just for our existing customers that are on the call, to a platform within our service group where those usernames and passwords get changed periodically, and also our staff doesn't have access to them. They use a tool to gain access in, and those things get randomized and all that kind of good stuff. So adding a little layer of security there. I think what we're talking about though is that end user that's at home right now and thinking about some of those issues that they have when they have a generic password set up on their firewall. ABS can help with that. So if you do need to talk to our service group, or an end user does, to help change that, we can certainly help with that through service.
I got one more question I want to squeeze in.
Yeah.
And then Tucker, I want to kick it over to you for some what is ABS seeing? Patrick is asking a really good question. Let's not get too technical with our answer, guys. It is about crypto. Everybody should know about ransomware. The question was, we know they can propagate to local servers and NAT drives. Do we know for sure that they are able to scan the network for shared folders and resources that aren't necessarily mapped and propagate the infection as well? Is there a way to mitigate that risk? The answer is yes. They are really smart with these ransomwares. They can traverse networks by various methods. We saw very recently where it jumped from one network to another, even in a geographic sense. So these things are getting smarter and smarter every day. And I'm going to kick it over to Brad. Brad, is there a way to mitigate that risk?
Network segmentation, and always patch your systems.
Yeah.
Those are the two really big ones. So make sure that anytime you are on a computer or on a server, you check to see if there's any updates. Even better, have a tool that's doing a continuous vulnerability scan within your environments as well as external to your environments to make sure that you don't have anything open or vulnerable that needs to be. So always patch your systems, keep them up to date, and then practice good networking hygiene by segmenting the networks.
Yeah, I think in the case that John's talking about, we had a customer that this was last week, had a six-figure ransom hit their system, and they did not pay the ransom. We restored them from backup, but they entered through a server that was not patched, like Brad talked about, but even worse, it was an older operating system that wasn't getting patches. So particularly customers and folks on the call that have servers with older operating systems, 2008 or even 2003 that's out there, that's our biggest concern, and making sure that we do get those patches that Brad's talking about.
Hey, Patrick, reach out to Tucker, your technical account manager, and we can dig into that a little bit with you guys.
That next one that Mark's asking about, his question is if one is on their home network and has access to their office server, if they are hacked on their home network, is this a window to the office server? That's an excellent segue into kind of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. The short answer to your question, Mark, is absolutely. If you are VPNing into your network and you are gaining access to the data within your your office network, you are a hole and a window for that hacker to gain access to that business network. Whether you're at home, whether you're at Starbucks, whether you're in the office, whenever you're gaining access to your business network, that is a potential risk. And, you know, we have seen over the last month such a massive shift. You know, Brad talked about Zoom and their massive increase. The first week of April, Microsoft Teams had an 1,800% increase of usage that week. We as ABS had that Monday in the first week of April, we set a record for number of tickets opened. The Tuesday after that, we broke that record. And the Wednesday after that, we broke that record. And the Thursday after that, we broke the record. All because we were having end users call and moving to home, how to help those folks gain access from home, and that move to the home office and remote workers, all that kind of good stuff. And we did that primarily just to get you guys up and working. And some of the security concerns that we worry about got pushed to the wayside because we had to have business up and working. And there are things that we need to do on those home networks and need to be worried about. I am starting to have new conversations with folks, not about how do we get everybody up and working anymore. It's about planning, how do we come out of this? You know, we're not as worried from a business perspective about if we're going to make it through. We've got the PPP money, we've got the government starting to talk about reopen things. We can start to see that light at the end of the tunnel. So now it's time to plan and think about making sure the security is up to date and how we pivot from being secure within the brick and mortar of our office to being secure at home. And that's really kind of the things that I wanted to talk about and make sure that folks are thinking about. As we do move from that mentality of how do we just stay up and working to now thinking more strategically and planning through it, I think I kind of am shifting everybody back to our layered security approach that we're professing to folks. And one of the ways we do that is the NIST approach. NIST is a compliance that the government has for companies that don't have a compliance. So small to medium businesses that may not fall under the umbrella of a HIPAA or a PCI, they can use the NIST framework to make sure their environment's secure. And more than anything, it basically boils down to having 5 different layers of your security plan. And those are identify your risk, protect your data and make sure that you have a lot protection methods in place, which is the traditional way to secure a network. But in addition to that, detect when you do have a threat and have a real good plan to respond and recover from those threats. When we think about a layered security approach, we want each of our companies to have at least one component for each of those 5 layers, if that makes sense. And we just went through a massive shift to all of those folks working at home and we need to reapply those 5 layers to our work at home users. So when we do that, that's both an end user and a business owner responsibility. And I want to talk through some of those things today. When I think about identify, it's probably important for you business owners and managers to think about what data those remote users are accessing and how we're securing that. So if we are accessing it via a home computer, for instance, and we didn't have laptops to give to all of our end users, or they didn't take their business computer home with them and plug it into their network, a lot of the security things that we use to secure that data have kind of gone out the window, and now they're incumbent on that end user at home to make sure they're staying secure.
So Tucker, are your customers looking at their policies now based on this? Like what's
Yeah,
my
it's
meaning?
one of the big recommendations we have, John, is creating a acceptable use policy for your end users that are working for home, and having in their minimum requirements. So it helps for 2 things. One is it helps increase the knowledge and thought about security for your end users. Do they have antivirus on their home computer? Are there computers on a OS that's getting patches like Brad was talking about earlier? Those kinds of things are what we would put in the acceptable use for you to work on your own device. If you are creating that acceptable use policy and making folks sign off on it, it helps you identify the folks that have an old PC at home that's running Windows ME on it and doesn't have any antivirus, right? And so I can start to work with that end user that is at home and help them get to our minimums, whether it's getting them a company-owned device or they updating their systems. We can make sure that we are at a minimum level, and that's really important.
Hey Tucker, one of the things that not literally but figuratively keeps me up at night, all these home users that rushed home, companies didn't have those products or the VPNs to take them home. They're working on home computers. Where are they saving the data? Do they have updated antivirus?
Yeah, great point, John. We all learned a lot of how we do things on a computer just through osmosis and trial and error. And I'm amazed at the amount of folks out there that are still saving critical data on their desktop and not getting that into a safe location. It's just sitting on the endpoint. So end users really need to be paying attention to that. I was talking to a CFO a couple of weeks ago who was telling me, I really appreciate ABS helping us out in getting the VPN set up and all the remote users up and working, but I'm amazed at how little I actually log into the VPN now. I'm doing everything through Teams, through Outlook and O365. I rarely log in on the VPN, and I'm thinking to myself, guess what? All of his critical data isn't being synced back to the server. And where is those spreadsheets that he's been working on? Where are all those documents? Because if that endpoint blows up or gets infected or whatever the case may be, I don't have the ability to recover nearly as well from that. And so the idea that Microsoft Teams and all of these collaboration tools have had this huge spike, I now need to be thinking about the security of that. How do I make sure that those platforms are as secure as my server and backing up to my server is? I just saw Logan chime in and ask, is OneDrive a solid option if not saving files to servers? It absolutely is. It's a great platform for that. Microsoft has done a very good job from a security standpoint. That is a platform that is HIPAA compliant, all sorts of things there. At the same time, if I need to restore data out of OneDrive. So it's very much an end user based platform. Do I need to actually do a backup of OneDrive? There are solutions out there for that. Those are kinds of the strategic things that we're thinking about from a security perspective that we weren't thinking about before, John.
Tucker, I'm sorry, Brad, go for it, sir.
I was just going to say, and monitor access to OneDrive, right?
Yeah.
So have a team that's actually going in and monitoring who's accessing OneDrive, looking for weirdness in that, right? Looking for the needles in the haystacks. Also monitoring for publicly shared links to data. That's another critical one.
There's a common misconception out there that I've put my stuff into Microsoft's cloud. I'm on Office 365. I'm storing into the cloud. I'm good. I'm secure and I'm backed up. That is not the case. You do need to be looking at your SaaS strategies of how am I backing this up? How am I keeping that secure? While they're pretty reliable people, there is such thing as ransomware inside of your Office 365 mailbox. Watched a tremendous video on that the other day, and as a tech guy, I was kind of blown away at the capability. Tucker, anything else before we kind of wrap this up and open up to Q&A?
Yeah, I guess two things, John. One is I want to really focus folks on that identify category. It's something that we don't think much about, particularly when I'm at the home office. I'm thinking about just protect, detect, and respond kind of areas. But in this new world and the massive shift that we made, we really need to identify the critical data and where it's being saved and think about how end users are reacting. And then the other one that I want to make sure everybody hears is your end users yourself, because we've lost a lot of those security tools, the big firewalls, the web filtering, a lot of the things that we do at the home office. We don't have those in the home. And so it's even more critical that the end users are being diligent and looking for threats that are coming their way. And particularly for our existing customers on the call, we recommend end user training and use a product called KnowBe4 for that. If you have invested in KnowBe4, really get with your technical account manager and make sure that we're stepping up those campaigns and we're making sure that the end users are looking for these threats coming in. They're going to be more and more, to Brad's point when he was talking about all the threats we're seeing out there in this COVID branding of phishing. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and we need end users to be very diligent in that area. I guess the last piece, John, is that I had a great conversation this morning with a business owner who is being pushed by some of his suppliers to implement more advanced security solutions, and he was saying, they're making me go down this path, but at the same time, because of COVID, because of the slowdown in the economy, I don't have a ton of money to be throwing at this either. And that's what we're here for, is to help you implement solutions that may not cost you anything, may be of low cost, but then think about the longer term after we've recovered out of this. So the solutions can be customized and they can be minimal cost right now, even though we've made this massive shift.
Perfect. Before I open it to Q&A, just kind of recap a little bit of what we heard today. We've heard some threats from Brad and some tips, same from Tucker. Email phishing and spoofing. I used to get emails from Mark Lewis all the time. Mark's our owner, that he needed iTunes gift cards bought and pictures sent to him immediately. We put tools in place not too long ago to stop that kind of stuff inside of our network. But security awareness training, like Tucker talked about, you business leaders, you have the ability to train your users how to spot malicious emails coming in. You can put USB drives randomly throughout the office and see who plugs them in. You can throw a little bit of shame factor behind that if you choose to, but it really kind of keeps people aware and hesitant on clicking things because they don't want to be the ones that got caught. Provide your employees with visual cues. We talked about the external portion in the subject line or the banner at the top. Put that out there. Give them cues to be alert and aware. And definitely, if you do not have this, either create it or reinforce it. Have a company policy for financial transactions. I am the treasurer of a board. They know, the hackers know who the president is. I get asked all the time to wire transfer $4,000 to a vendor immediately. It's an emergency. I know it's not real, but if I think it is, I call that president, hey, is this real? End users, what can you do? Just be aware. Hover over links before clicking. Usually if there's a link in the email and you don't know who it is, it's either going to be a sales guy or it's going to be a hacker. Just hover over that link, a window will pop up, and you'll see where it's going to go. Pay close attention to the first portion. That's the most important part. Is it really google.com or is it goog1e.com? Pay attention for those things and double check email addresses and websites. If you happen to click, look at the address bar up there. In Outlook, if you get an email from John Clark, you could double click that and make sure that it is actually my email address and not somebody else. So there's some easy tips. Brad talked about DNS hijacking. Businesses out there, you can implement a cloud-based DNS security. You can implement it right now, even though your folks are not in the office. It's actually relatively cheap and very easy to deploy.
Very simple to deploy.
Yeah.
So we've got some great questions out here, John, and I want to start with Mark's. What does Mark need with iTunes gift cards anyway? I certainly agree with you, Mark, that he doesn't need them. But the funny thing about John's comment is I still get requests like that from Mark from his real email address. So anyway, a couple of more serious ones, let's put it that way, Cindy, this is a great question. We've been using KnowBe4 for security training and phishing since 2016. Since our building has been shut down, we've been asked by execs to pause training and phishing because our staff is already stressed enough. I don't think this is a good plan. Any advice on talking them to continue this training? I couldn't agree with you more, Cindy. I think the first thing I would say is the massive uptick that both Brad and I can tell you we are seeing in phishing and specifically around COVID. This is a big deal in that the hackers are smart and they are very much expanding their operations to because of the opportunity they have here. One of the things Brad talked about was, again, those COVID phishing. One of the interesting articles I read this week is that the phishing attempts with COVID in them, that 20% of those were targeted to the United Kingdom, 15% of those were targeted to France, and only 8% were targeted to the US. So what does that tell you? Well, they're following the track of COVID. The biggest outbreak of COVID has been and the hotspot biggest outbreak and has been in Italy and in the European Union, And so that's where the attackers are targeting. But we're now shifting where that big outbreak is here in the US, and we're going to see a even larger uptick in phishing attempts surrounding COVID as we go. So I thought that was an incredibly interesting stat. The other piece of that is I realize they're stressed out. I totally get that the training may interfere with that, but I can tell you that a security breach will stress them out even more. And
Yeah, what's the
we need
cost
to
of
be
stopping
diligent
that?
about that.
What's the cost of stopping that training? Tucker, you said our example earlier had a 6-figure ransom.
That's right.
Ransomware typically comes through public-facing remote access, like an RDP, or through a user's email. So it's something that you can't take lightly.
This is a good one for you, Brad. We store our files in Amazon Web Services and Cloudberry Explorer for Amazon to bring files up and down. If a hack takes over an employee's computer when they have Cloudberry Explorer open, can they take over our database?
Yeah, so that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes back to that monitor, right? So monitor what's going on. What are the VPC or the VPC calls or the API calls going on to your S3 buckets? So that way you can monitor for malicious flows. But even from a granular standpoint on that question on the computer itself, for sure. So when you go to open up Cloudberry, you have to log in, right? You have to have credentials to access to that network. If the computer is compromised, a criminal could easily place a tool on the computer that's actually monitoring keystrokes. So then they'll see the username and password and be able to take the data that way. So it's a very creative way to do it. But yes, for sure, if you can own the endpoint, you can own whatever it's doing.
Brad, do you know if web browsers like Google still store saved passwords in plain text?
That's a really good question, and unfortunately they do. And this was something that I was wanting to kind of bring up. So I'm glad you brought it up, John. Stop using whether it's Chrome or Internet Explorer or whatever browser of choice. Don't save passwords in them. That's bad. There's pieces of malware that will actually steal that data off of the browser itself. Use password managers. That's a really good way to avoid that. And then when you're utilizing password managers, a lot of them today will sync across your devices. So now you can start to create really weird, complex passwords. And you don't need to remember them. You just need to remember one good, solid password.
Yeah, kind of circle it back to that question. If the asset is compromised and you're saving your passwords in Google, it's just like opening a notepad file. Your username, your password, the URL that you use that information on is readily available. Using the same password as well. If you use the same password for every site, they get that one. They can try all kinds of different other sites we could get in a rabbit hole on this one, so we should probably move on. Any other questions there, Tucker?
Lee has a great one. Are there different procedures for virtual machines as opposed to physical servers? We've recently introduced a whole slew of virtual machines from having none before. The answer I get is no, in the sense that a virtual machine acts like a physical server in the sense that the operating system needs to be updated. There definitely needs to be antivirus on those machines. We manage a virtual machine almost identically to the way we manage a physical machine that just has a single operating system on it. Brad, anything I missed there?
The only thing that I would really add into that, and Tucker, that was all really solid advice. I would add in closed ports that don't need to be open. That's a really common mistake is to leave things open that shouldn't be open. And think of ports as kind of like services of a computer. So it's really important to make sure you're practicing the good hygiene from that standpoint as well.
And that advice goes for a physical machine too. So really from a procedural standpoint, there's really nothing different. It's more to Brad's point, when you start having that virtual machine creep where I've got lots and lots of them spinning up, sometimes you miss those procedures that you need to be following. So if you went to a whole slew of machines, as you were talking about, Lee, you got to make sure you're following those processes all the way through and procedures.
You know, Lee, going from physical to virtual, I'm going back to the example of last week, Tucker, how we recovered our customer. You know, that NIST, that very bottom part is recovery. How are you going to recover? Being in a virtual environment, you've got new recovery options, and that is how we recovered our customer, was through the technology of virtual environments and SAN storage. Pretty amazing what our technical team was able to do with that company. But look at your recovery options now that you're in an advanced environment.
Yeah, and we've added it, it's a real easy way to wrap this up. We've moved from that physical environment that includes both servers and all those endpoints out there now to the virtual environment and then the cloud environment. Make sure that your security practices are addressing all three of those. And that's really important. If you get one thing out of today, understand that we do have those three different layers now, particularly now that we've sent everybody home. That physical environment and that cloud environment almost become more important these days to make sure that we have a security plan around.
So I think we should probably wrap up, guys. We got about 4 minutes left. There's one more question, but I'm going to use it as a way to close this out. I did want to jump back to the slide that I have up on the screen. End users, employees at home, if you're using your home computer, check your antivirus, change that router password, look for Windows updates. You're going to do a pretty good, solve a pretty big chunk of your vulnerabilities just doing that. But also be cautious of who else is accessing your computer. I imagine kids, after you're done working, are getting on Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever it is that they're playing nowadays. They can invite malicious software in unintentionally. So just be cautious of that while you're using home devices and insecure devices during your work from home time. The last question was, can you please send me a copy of your slides? I'm excited that at least one person wants what I whipped up. So send me your email address. I've got Priscilla's. I will make sure that it's sent out. Let me get back over here to our...
I guess the other thing I would say there too for our managed customers that are on the call, follow up with your technical account manager. They'll make sure that they get you all this information as well.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
Security is a journey, not a destination, not a one size fits all. Happy to help you guys with anything you need during this time. I don't think we have any more questions. So if you guys want to wrap it up, I think we can call it a day.
Yeah, I guess more than anything, I appreciate everybody joining. It gave me the opportunity to take a shower this week and shave. So I thank you for that. But I also want to make sure that you guys are being diligent and let us know how we can help for sure.
All right. Hey, everybody, we want to continue to do these. Our goal is to educate and help you. Please send us topic ideas. What are you guys talking about inside your companies? What can we talk about to help you? If you want some one-on-one time, my information's on the screen. I am mostly busy, but sitting in my dining room all day. So I'd love the human interaction.
I also want to thank Brad for
yes, thank you,
being
Brad.
with us and taking the time and great information from it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for attending.
Final reminder, we're going to put together a couple of industry focused, one for legal, one for healthcare. Reach out to us if you want to make sure you're in. We will push that, that date and time out through LinkedIn and email. Appreciate everybody's time. Hope you have a great day.